So I thought I'd give a couple of little tips that could have helped me early on in the diagnosis and the journey that I had that would probably be good for someone to know. Firstly, early on, everything's a whirlwind. Just accept that. Your hands are in the fate of the doctors and the nurses, and they're very skilled. They're very good doctors and nurses. They know their trade. But in some respects, you think of them like God. Like they've got all the answers and you're just following what they say and everything. As you go on, you learn that you probably need to be on top of your treatment as well. And it's really handy to have a little notepad handy with you, to have always with you, and write down major treatments you have or major directions that you hear the nurses give or give, because they may be good that you're able to remind different shifts of nurses, because you'll have a day shift, say when you're in hospital, and then there might be a night shift that go all night, and sometimes all the communication from the day shift isn't picked up by the night shift. And I'll give you an example. There was a medication that I was taking ongoing, and it wasn't communicated to me to stop on a certain date and this was the clinic. They did not communicate with me, not that I can remember. So I didn't stop that medication. What that meant is that a new medication that I was due to start couldn't start until 48 hours after the first medication stopped, because its effects would counteract the new medication that I was going to go on. So there had to be a 48-hour gap. So once they learnt that I was still taking the previous medication, they got me to stop, and the nurses said stop, and the doctors said we have to delay the new medication by 24 hours. And so sure, I was in hospital, I was an inpatient, and the day shift were all aware of that, the doctor was all aware of that, and what happened was the night shift came in. It was a busy changeover. It is like a bit of a the ward, the cancer ward can be quite busy, so it wasn't communicated effectively, and they were about to start me on the new medication, the night shift, 24 hours early, which would mean that it would waste the new medication because it wouldn't be as effective. The fact that I had overheard the conversation, I was able to mention to the new night shift nurses, hey, I overheard that I shouldn't start this because I had this previous medication and it was supposed to be 48 hours. Can you just check with the doctor for me? That alerted them to the change. They went and spoke with the doctor and came back and said, you're right, we're delaying this by 24 hours. It's just those little things that you need to write down, because it won't necessarily be picked up. And there's lots of little things like that. The other thing that they always ask me, I'll go to the clinic or that, what day did you have your lumbar puncture on? What day did you have this medicine on? Or what day did you last get your Hicksman changed? Or your when did you last have your fungal medication or your platelets? It's good to just have a notebook and note the day that you're in the clinic. On Wednesday you had blood transfusion, things like that, because you'll be able to give those quick answers. Although you would think that they would understand and they would communicate all of that, don't take it for granted. Be your own guard keeper in relation to medications and things that happen. Another tip, there's two procedures. One is a lumbar puncture. That's where they're going into in between the spine. They're taking samples out and often putting chemo into your spine. It's a procedure which they will bend you over almost in a fetal position on the bed or lie you on the side, but you have to be really still when they do this, so you've got to be alert. But and they will give you instruction, and they will just say what they're doing, and it's soft instruction, and they're very good. The doctors are very good at calming the nerves. But my recommendation, if you've got some earpods and play some soft music. in the background. You'll still hear the doctors, they'll still, but it just takes your mind off the procedure. Yes, they do put a local anaesthetic in, and that's probably the one that you feel the most, the local anaesthetic needle that goes in. You kind of feel that going in. That numbs it, but it is a bit of a little bit of a longer procedure that they've got to go in with these to get samples, and they'll put the equal amount of chemo back in. So there's the other procedure, which is very similar, is a bone marrow biopsy. Now this, they won't go directly in, they'll go into the sides, so each side of your thigh. They'll go left side, the next time they might do right side. That's where they take a sample of your bone marrow and they'll send it away for testing, and that gives them things like the cancer count within your bone marrow. So locally in your hospital, they'll put it under a microscope and they'll get a count of how much cancer is left in your bone marrow, if there's any, and they'll send some away to a lab for scientific testing because they can get a even higher cancer count. So maybe under a microscope in the hospital they might be able to see 1 cell in 10,000, but in the scientific lab it might be 1 cell in 100,000 or a million, so they can see that level. But it's a different procedure in that they'll give you what's called a green whistle. It's something that you inhale. It actually looks like a green whistle. It comes out your mouth and you're breathing it in, and it just relaxes you and it takes the heat off. You just feel sort of spaced out. It's really, I recommend it. It just takes the heat off the whole needle thing, just relaxes you. Where the lumbar puncture, you can't take that because you have to be in control of your body movements. You've got to be really still for them. So that is better with their local anaesthetic, a bit of music to play in your mind. So just check that. Last tip I will say is that if you're going to get treatment, sometimes it helps just to say to the doctor, are they labelled correctly? I had an instance where the medication wasn't labelled correctly, but they corrected it during the procedure. But it's just good to know little tips like that to be aware of.